Well, hello everyone. Here, show you right here. I talk about for the imaginable of tomorrow, and I know I showed everybody here this picture right here, but talking about right here of the stars right here. But this right here is a Word document right here that I thought about go ahead and writing for you everybody, and talking about for the future though. And I was also thinking too, yeah, for the future is born, but then also for imaginable of tomorrow, and so I just thought I'd go ahead and just talk to everybody here about the story here, and talk about our future. And a lot of times, that it sure seems that way. That if you're going to be writing a resume, that you want to go ahead and talk about your skills, right? But a lot of times, it sure seems that way. To where if you want to talk about, the topic of the title could go by is like imaginable of tomorrow. And it talks about for the future, like what the future holds, and also other things that's expected to come. Like we're talking about between technology and also talking about beside infrastructure, and of course about story, love stories, and other sorts of stories, that anything that you would like to share about. But one of those is about that story writing, and I want to talk to everybody here about a lot of times. It's like that whenever somebody, well, if you do wind up meeting somebody at some point, and a lot of times it's like, that most of the time, most employers would actually like to watch you work, so that way they can get a good idea about what is it that you do and what is it that you're good at. And it's possible that a manager or somebody's going to want to sit right next to you and ask you to go ahead and show me what is it that you do and how is it that you do that. And so, I mean, I really don't know if all managers are going to do that, but let's just say that some of them. And let's say talk about the stars that I see, and I see the future when I speak of the future. Thinking about the year 2022 and where I met most of those goals. So you have right here this writing right here, and so if we see this right here that talk about for the email address right here, but while I'm writing right here, that it sure seems that way to where that like everybody else will probably say too, if you want to start out a few sentences for the story right here, and I can go and just say something like, for what comes to my mind. So yeah, for what comes to my mind, and what comes to my mind, and I can maybe put a comma right there, and what comes to my mind, talking about the study, about how to approve for the better. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times it's like, I could also put on here, I don't know if you want to call it, the cause, or just the subvert title, or anything else that you were thinking about using. But talking about right here of, another word, if you want to say, just to kind of like get the job done, is to word it, what word or sentence do you think that you would maybe like to use, just to be able to think is toward it, think of something that maybe that you can get done within a certain time. And let's just say that, the study about how to improve for the better. And, besides, like anybody saying, think smart though, is that, think about, good, good positive thinking. Based on, I would just say, based on the values at work. Based on the value that works. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that if you're going to be typing up any notes, and maybe taking down any sentences or anything like that, and a lot of times it sure seems that way, that that you take down a few notes, it is, and you're likely thinking, oh, okay, and then you start writing, and let's just say that yeah, people would actually like to watch you work. They like to ask, somebody would ask you to go ahead and just continue writing, and then we'll go ahead and watch you right here. But still, when I look at the stars, when I look at the stars at midnight, comma, I think. Let me see here. If I want to put a comment, but yeah, when I look at the stars at midnight, I think about the years ahead. So really, I'm like, can you really put together a story based on words and sentences like that? Whenever you think of ahead of time, that kind of gets you kind of thinking as toward if you prepare ahead of time for something. So a lot of times that whenever you do write in any sorts of sentences, and maybe let's just say if you're typing up a document, or maybe you're doing like any sorts of journal writing, you think about the future though, and like anybody say that really, you might say, you may have heard that before. Yeah, a lot of things can happen, right? But if you set like a goal to where that in 3 years from now, and everybody else might even say that, well, really, that sounds just a little bit like if you're betting somebody about if you're right or wrong about something. But a lot of times it sure seems that way. That whenever we think about that, though, is that yeah, whenever it comes to writing about something and talking about the future and what the future holds and all that. But if we're talking about that with the unimaginable of tomorrow, though, that this story right here is based on the fact about, for what somebody sees coming up in the near future. And it's like if you're going to be working on a story and putting together the puzzle pieces just to try to match them up with, something that you got your mind set that's supposed to happen in the future. And we may not know exactly yet what goes on in the future, but let's just say that if you could read about what's going to be expecting to happen in the near future, and like anybody say that a lot of things are coming to our mind, especially. But one thing that is really coming to my mind as of now, of course, is that yeah, talking about is toward that the things that you find out later on from what was originally discovered, from in the past. So let's just say that if you're trying to put together the whole story, and let's just say that if you're trying to figure it out to where you spend so many hours trying to figure out, okay, about what results work on, anything else that you're working on, and everybody else will probably say too that yeah, well, the imaginable of tomorrow, to me, that sounds just a little bit like, well, make believe, or you thought it was made up, and so it sure seems that way. That nowadays, here in this world, here in America, people will probably say too that a lot of the things that we always thought that were all made, make believe, and so that's why it sure seems that way to where that whenever we close our eyes and dream about things, that it sure seems that way to where that a lot of things that maybe about that dream that just don't make any sense or any such and such, but still but if we're talking about when we dream, that we dream about having something that yeah, stuff that we've always want to do and always want to accomplish, but it sure seems that way to where that a lot of things about that dream that just don't make any sense really, and does really everything have to really make a whole lot of sense, or if anything that, well, really that how do you answer that question in the fact about that if it hasn't happened yet, and so let's just say if I were to write a story, and let's just say that story is going to begin by stating as to where that, how can you tell about a story, something for which has not happened yet? So let's just say if you were to be predicting that this is what's going to be going on, within the next 2 years from now, within the next 5 years from now, and so it sure seems that way that that whenever you write a story, though, that a lot of readers are going to maybe warn toward it, okay, especially like the language. And so if anybody who's going to be reading any source of writing like this right here, and 102 is to where that, yeah, that, it's anybody who's going to be watching you type and work and then just kind of, talk about your story it is. And I want to know just a little bit too toward what exactly are you talking about? You're talking about is this toward that I thought it was make believe. Yeah, I thought my thought for the imaginable for the imaginable mind thinking, yeah, for the imaginable mind thinking was make believe. So you have right here of talking about for make believe right here. So I can go ahead and maybe put quotation like yeah, something that anybody say that if you're going to be writing this in a Word document right here, and just want to know too that for what you call for make believe right here, meaning to where that yeah, make believe. If I can get that right there, make believe. Okay, now for make believe, so a lot of the stuff that for what we call for make believe though, and you're probably thinking too that yeah, well a lot of things that you've seen on TV those years ago, and a lot of times it was like that poster board, that posters, those big size large 44 by 50 inch posters that you remember you had, anything that you may have had in your bedroom or anything that you thought that was just totally impossible. And so it sure seems that way to where every time I think about that, it's like, you want to go ahead and look up at the stars at the night sky, especially like on a Saturday night or something like that, on New Year's night or something like that. You look up at the stars, you think about the future, right? And a lot of things about the future that you think is just impossible. But it seems like to me that a lot of people say that, yeah, is it about putting in your fair share of the work or just understanding just a little bit more as to where does it really take, as to where helping other people understand what is it that you're referring to and what is it that you're talking about and what is it that you're trying to put together. And so it's like, yeah, a language and just understanding just a little bit about as to where that a lot of things that we can imagine for tomorrow or from a year from now that we might think is toward it. Well, it exists as of today, and of course that's still something that's still being developed. But on the other hand, it's like yeah, that whenever you watch somebody work and watch somebody type, that a lot of times it sure seems that way that kind of gives anybody a better idea, just a little bit about what is it that you're doing, what is it that you're working on. So let's just say that altogether, if I were to continue typing right here, and let's just say if I were to say something like, so far as, a story, for, that only, for which, only, can be explained by that by the teller who has had that experience. So a lot of times, yeah. So whenever you're going to be writing, while you're writing, that it's like you're trying to get the program, if you want to call it, it's like you're trying to get it to generate. You're trying to get the program to understand what is it that you're trying to say. Because I noticed that, like you say, Word documents or any other program that you're using, but still, do you think that that's important too, just knowing about the imaginable of tomorrow, though, that while you're going to be working on something, and then there's going to be programs, if the language for what you program, like, yeah, anything that you're going to be doing on paper, though, that I guess the question kind of goes by as to where is part of the work done for you. So it's like, yeah, you're trying to get the program to recognize what is it that you're trying to say and what is it that you're doing. And so it's like, every time I think about that, though, it's like, yeah, well, whenever, and I know that that's probably pretty convenient to anybody that is saying to where if you're going to be working on any sort of document and you're trying to say something, and let's just say if you're working on something, and so a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, while you're going to be working on something, and maybe that you might notice somebody who's watching you work, and let's just say that if you spend so much time working on something, and just know about with me though that whenever I think about this right here, I also keep thinking if I were to include any text writing, like if I were to use like maybe a program like InDesign or InCopy or so, just to be able to do text wrap right here, like have an image right there, and then to have some writing right there, side right there, your syntax right there, or anything like that, typographical work right there, just so people can see about how the text are placed and also how the images is in your displayed and all. But still, that the thing about the picture right here and anything that comes to my mind right here, and anybody say that for what idea that really approaches everybody else's attention right here. But talk about for the imaginable of for what the future looks like by 2022. And I was also thinking too, go ahead and put 2024 right there. But still, but what I really want to talk about right here is talking about that whenever you're going to be writing something, and then let's just say that, that while you're going to be working, and sometimes that there's going to be some employers that are going to ask if you can go ahead and just continue writing, about something, continue to do the coding work or continue to work on your work, and they'll go ahead and watch you work. And a lot of times, like everybody else will probably want to know too, is to where do you think that that's really kind of like unimaginable, and while you're working, no, it sure seems that way to where that, yeah, well, do you kind of call that too much entertaining, or do you kind of call that as to where that somebody's just want to know what is it that you're working on, and if they like what you do. And so let's just say that, yeah, well, if you're not, I'm like, yeah, like with me though, a lot of the things that I've been trying to improve from a lot over the years, of course, most of the time it's the language, but let's just say that that while you're writing, though, that I can tell that sometimes that is it real important for a lot of our letters they kind of speak at their own terms, so far as is what exactly does this sentence say right here, and what exactly does this mean right here. So if anybody who's going to be looking at this, and they're likely want to know too, that first of all, if they didn't write it, then they're not going to really understand it very well. So if there's going to be like any parentheses or hyphen marks or any quotations or anything like that, and one thing that kind of I just want to know too, that anybody who's wanting to be a writer one of these days, that if you're going to be including any source of question into any paragraphs of a sentence that you want to talk about, so far as how can you tell about a story from which something that hasn't happened yet, and they're going to go ahead and end that your sentence right there with the question. So a lot of times that a lot of most writers might do that, and more likely they're going to do that, so that way that anybody who's going to be reading the book or reading any source of article, that kind of gets like what you call this positive thinking, to where okay, yeah, well, you can go ahead and speak to the audience and go ahead and ask the person as to where, well, what are you thinking? So yeah, so a lot of times that that it seems like to me though that any book writers or anybody who's going to be writing any articles, to be published or anything like that, are going to be using that source of saying to where they're going to go ahead and include a question mark right there, like it's like a quote or some action verbs or anything like that. But still, that whenever you do write something, though, it sure seems that way. That a number of things are kind of going through your mind while you're typing, though, and while you're writing and while you're thinking about things. So let's just say that if you include, like on an essay, though, of anything that contains at least 200 or 300 or more words or something like that, based on experience, right? But let's just say if I were to write, something such as to where I can imagine what my future holds. And besides courage, though, I can also put on here is that something I can discover that makes my work very interesting. So in order to be able to make it very interesting, and it sure seems that way, that do you really have to include like anything such as maybe go ahead and put like a subtitle on your front, or if anything that make sure that you give the source of language, give it at least at least 2 inches or so space in between, but still that in order for you to be recognized for anything that you're going to be writing, really, though, that whenever you start writing and typing something, though, that it sure seems that way to where that first of all, I guess, do you really have to, speak over the fact about it, somebody else who's looking over your work and looking and seeing exactly what is it that you're doing and what is it that you're talking about. And so it sure seems that way to where that whenever, while I'm writing, though, I always keep thinking as to where there's somebody else that could be looking at my work, at some point that this somebody's going to be looking at what I was working on and maybe be asking me, okay, what's this or what's that? So a lot of times it's like, anything that you're going to be talking about, really, and at 102 is to where if it's going to be a love story or just a message for the future or something like that. But really, though, that whenever you do write any source of language, though, it sure seems that way. That almost all the time, I'm always thinking about as to where that what do you think that somebody's thinking about? I'm like, what is it that you're thinking about while you're writing? And I could probably say almost all the time that I don't want to include just 5 words in a sentence. Maybe I want to include maybe about 4 more paragraphs and just saying, the positive or negative thinking. Okay, well, that's possible. Well, that's a good idea right there. So it's like, whenever every time I try to write a form, and let's just say if it's 5 pages long, then maybe not everybody's going to have a whole lot of time to read about that. And so that's why it sure seems that way to where that just to make something just a little bit more simple to read, you may want to know too to include a few hashtags or just something that only, contains about 5 sentences long, and just to kind of give somebody a better idea what is it that you're talking about. But I could probably say too that that whenever it comes to writing an article about something, though, that it sure seems that way most of the time. It's really about the stuff that's happening really in the present, and then compared to like the stuff that you put a lot of your hard work and effort into doing. And so that's why it's like, like every time you're working, though, it's like you're more likely you have to have somebody read over your work and just to kind of better understand what is it that you're talking about, what is it that you do. And so that's why it sure seems that way that that whenever you do start writing about something, and then you show somebody a picture of something, and then you start to you give it a title, and then you start to working on a few sentences and like a word of phrase or anything like that that you want to write about, but still. But talking about for the imaginable of tomorrow, though, is that let's just say that if you were working most of the afternoon, maybe most of the night, working on something, and let's just say if that letter or that document that you were typing included a one question and maybe anything that you wanted to quote or anything based on feedback, though, and a lot of everybody else might even say that, well, I do know just a little bit of what you're talking about, or I don't know at all what you're talking about. So it's like, yeah, whenever I think about the future, though, I also, that kind of opens my mind of knowing about that there's a study about where our future is going. That, what we're talking about by 2024, that, hopefully that they'll have something like, the bundle or something like that pack, or I'm like, oh, yeah, something with that fast, for the internet speed, and also a lot of things that for education wise and also promotional wise, especially, but still that. But when we think about tomorrow, though, that could also be maybe in a week from now, and that could also maybe be a year from now. But whenever I think about the future, I also think about the possibilities. And usually that's really what I'm referring to is the possibilities. And a lot of everybody else might even say that, that could also maybe be about the promises and your promises and maybe the overall expectations as well. So it's like, yeah, most of the time it's like, well, if your research and study, if it works, and then maybe a lot of writers would find that very appealing if you start writing about something, and let's just say that it's something that does sound very familiar to another reader, and they're gonna likely want to know too, what exactly that you were referring to and all that. But still, but I want to read everybody here this right here talking about for climate change, but most this the word of sentences right here that talks about one of my goals is to discover what I can find that someone else finds it useful, and imagine that a lot of the great things that we dreamed of having at home and that now give us the ability to where we can think brighter about where we are going or where we go when it comes to studying about our planet and our infrastructure and the climate change, and most important, understanding our how our information is used in this world. And imagine that tomorrow will show a world based on the new things not yet to be discovered. So it sure seems that way, that's really what it's about here, is that anything that has not been discovered yet. Not all companies know how that works, and maybe not all companies and businesses know anything about that. But still, that it sure seems that way to where that most of the time, though, a lot of writers, anything that really sounds very appealing, though, you probably want to know too that really that any skills cannot be developed for the better on their own. For sure that anybody who has worked very hard on something and just knowing about how useful it is, then everybody say is to where, yeah, well, for how important is that compared to knowing about that, if there's anything that just starts working, and for sure that something is not going to just start working on its own just because that just because that you may have heard of it, or just because it worked the first time or for the second time. And a lot of everybody else might even say that, well, if it worked the first time or the second time, then that means that more likely it's going to work. But still, that what are the requirements? And let's just say people might even say that, well, the requirements could also be is toward that for who was really, the developer, who really developed that study, and who really discovered that work in discovery. So anybody, the founder and of course the creator and also the person who managed to put that data together and managed to introduce to the new products and all that. So that's really what I'm talking about, is that the stuff that we don't use every day and the stuff that we are not aware of, for the imaginable of tomorrow. And so that's why it sure seems that way that I have right here for 2022 right here. But still, that for Midnight Together right here. So this right here is a design I have for imaginable of tomorrow. But still, that we all know that we can say tomorrow for about a lot of things, really. Tomorrow can mean a number of things, really. But still, what I'm mainly talking about is that tomorrow hasn't happened yet. So I'll go and write down. I'm like, I think I wrote on the top right here. It has that has not happened yet. So it's yet to be discovered. So when we think about that right there, things that have not happened yet, that's really, if you want to look at that as a magic key right there. If it hasn't happened yet, then it's still a possibility. That's something. So like anybody say that, whenever we call a dream, though, it's a stuff. And I can go ahead and probably highlight that in bold if I'm like, yeah. If I can go ahead and, I'm just trying to, think here. All right. Okay, there we are. Yeah, highlight that in bold. But, the stuff, if it hasn't happened yet, then ain't that, isn't that what companies are looking for right there? The stuff that hasn't happened yet, it's still a possibility. Very interesting. So when we think about the future, though, that we think about, tomorrow. And so every time somebody thinks about, I'm like, tomorrow has not happened yet. So really, try to think about that every day, everybody. That that's not what I'm trying to say. But try to think about that, everybody. That tomorrow has not happened yet. And I can go ahead and copy and paste that too. But anyway, but still, tomorrow has not happened yet. So when we think about that right there, knowing about that, that whenever it comes to the imaginable of tomorrow, though, that's another way of stating is toward to keep that a possibility, toward a lot of those goals and achievements. Just because it hasn't happened yet, well, that's still a possibility. So try to think about that. Toward what do you think? Where do we see our future within the next year? And a lot of everybody else might even say that, really that well, it's not going to happen. Well, I doubt it's going to happen because it's been 3 years. But let's just say the positive thinking could also be about is to where that when we think about the future, though, that we also think about is to where that maybe that anything that you thought that you would not sharing, especially, and people may say that, well, really, that if you can just tell a story, this story could be something from the past, but still, talk about a story, talk about a dream that you had, about something, and let's just say that dream's going to, it may not make a whole lot of sense, but let's just say, think about that, to where if you have a dream one of these days about something that was very interesting to you, and let's just say if one of those dreams was to where that you would find something interesting, and let's just say that if some of your work was even published, maybe if it was a famous writing or for a cookbook or for a publisher, or maybe if you were picked to be able to write the software edition, or maybe if you were chosen, to be able to lead this project, for a company or something like that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that for what we call the imaginable, though, but still, though, that it sure seems that way that since you were a kid, though, it's like you may think that you're very limited on a lot of the other resources, to the point to where that you may think that it's not going to happen, but still, if we were to put our mind to it, like just like spelling our name right here, and you're probably thinking too, is that for what the future holds right here, that you want to know too, is that when we think about that though, if that yeah, whenever it comes to knowing what's expected to happen within the future, that where do we see our future going? Well, what do we see coming in the near future? Well, what I actually see is that I actually see is to where that yeah, besides the study though, but about a website, yeah, web pages, and understanding more about our security measures, and understanding about technology and about the language that with these programs, though, that having that ability to where we have access to them from home, and knowing that whenever we think about this, is toward that whenever we do our homework now, that what exactly are we telling these software programs necessarily? That yeah, well, shouldn't we think about that to where that with our smartphones and tablets? Shouldn't we think about that to where that these smartphones and tablets need to recognize the person? The person can go ahead and program that device to where that you would be recognized and your work will be recognized. So it sure seems that way that first of all, that anything that we're going to be doing nowadays, that you would want to go ahead and recognize what is it that you're working on, and trying to get the program to recognize what you're working on, and then then you're able to program that device to where that this is the word that you're trying to say, and this is the source of communication that goes on. So really, that something that later to be developed, and also something to be discovered at some point too, and so it's like, yeah, for what we call imaginable of tomorrow, that it's like, yeah, well, imaginable of tomorrow, which means it's toward the stuff that has not been found. So I can go and put right here for tomorrow, is to where it was just it was just found. So let's just say that whenever somebody finds something that represents you, the work that you were doing, for found. So a lot of times people might even say too that what does that usually mean? Whenever somebody finds something such as a resume, yeah, something that's found, it was just found. I'll go and put on there, it was found, discovered. But I know with me though that whenever whenever something is found, then it sure seems that way. That usually means that if it's never been seen before or discovered before, or if anybody has heard of it. So anything that sounds really familiar to anybody else, and like everybody else will probably say too, that well, really that that book title right there, or that title, or that design right here looks very very interesting, very familiar. So yeah, so if you were to give the title imaginable of yesterday or last year or something like that, maybe a lot of publishers or any companies might even want to know too that well, really, if that really sounds very appealing compared to the imaginable of tomorrow. So yeah, the stuff that goes on for tomorrow and next week, it hasn't happened yet. So think about that companies would probably be looking for certain candidates who would be have an open mind toward what's possible, what's soon to come, soon to come in the future. So that's why it sure seems that way, that when we think about that though, is that yeah, well, everything that we more likely dreamed about, And you'll probably likely want to know too that the things that we dreamed about having at some point, yeah, like I say, that is toward one of those things. The more likely that we dreamed about, more likely one of them will probably be is toward it. Yeah, well, if you want to be introduced to something cool or anything such as, yeah, that you want to be a storyteller, you want to be a host to the story, to talk to a story about talk about a true story, or anything so far as being an inventor or maybe archaeologist or anybody else like that. So it sure seems that way that when we think about that, though, it seems like to me though that yeah, it seems so impossible to be true just because that nobody else knows what you're talking about. It's all in your imagination. It's not going to happen. Well, for how much hard work did you put into it? But I tell you one thing, everybody, that there are some things about what you do, though, that yeah, that things that are very interesting. But just knowing as to where that yeah, everybody, or your parents might even say too, to tell their kids that you can still earn credit just for trying. Give yourself credit just for trying. All that hard work, even though if you if you were not able to accomplish all of the things that you worked so hard on, that at least that knowing that you tried. And most parents would probably tell their children that I'm proud of you just for trying. At least try, do your best you can, at least try. And even know if you were not able to succeed, or if anything, that maybe not everything was above expectation. And yeah, well, I'm sure a lot of parents will probably say too that I give my kids 100% good credit, just for trying. Did the best you can. And so really so when we think about that though, is like you may have had a good open-minded about a lot of things that you've been wanting to do, that you've been talking about that you want to do for the past 10 years or so, but still that you've been able to accomplish some of those goals. But let's just say if one of those goals is going to be a buzz as to where that you want to become famous for something. And like anybody would probably say too that if you did want to become famous for something, or to be recognized for something incredible, and anybody would probably say too, yeah, well, maybe talk about a story about yeah, about how you found something. And I guess that's a good way to start. If you want to talk about a story about what you found, tell anybody a story about that you found something. Yeah, you found something. That yeah, if you found something, or something that comes to your mind, anything that you really wanted to talk about, just with somebody else. And so they say that would probably be a good way to start too. So every time I think about that is toward the imaginable of tomorrow, though, that you want to kind of talk about that is toward the stuff that hasn't happened yet. And so I know a lot of companies would say too that that's really the top of a study that we're really looking for, is that yeah, the stuff that hasn't happened yet. And anybody want to know too is to where that you've been waiting for stuff, for the incredible that happened. But it sure seems that way toward it. Do you really have to talk to the right experts? You're just knowing about when to wait, for that moment to happen. And so that's really what I'm talking about right there. But talk about right here is that talk about I think about the year 2022, and where I meet most of my goals and achievements. But I also want to go ahead and add right here, and knowing about that anything that you talk about for the future though, is that the yeah, the signature right here, which I know I talked before about. But still, though, anything for what's for soon to come, though. But still, that whenever people watch you write and watch you work, and let's just say if they're just checking out a profile page or anything else that you've been working on, And a lot of times, though, too, even if it's a rough draft or anything like that that you're working on, and a lot of everybody else might even say that yeah, people approach your ideas mainly because of your activity, while you were working on something that somebody else, people more likely, they like watching you at work, for that reason that people are going to be watching you work. And sometimes everybody else might even say that's usually what happens. Like everybody else will probably want to know too. One of my dreams, of course, was actually hosting my own, studio, actually. And people who listen, or people who do watch me work, and I want to know too is that if you were to write about something, and I could probably say is to word if I were to be writing about something, I kept thinking too. Well, besides friends, imaginary friends, or anything like that, or if anything it's talking about is to where that while I write a letter, I also keep thinking too that if somebody else were to be reading my letters, and what exactly that if they would have a clear idea of what I'm talking about, or for anything else that comes to my mind, really. So it's like kind of like a back and forth discussion, something like that. But still, but whenever I think about the future, though, I also keep thinking too is to word it that yeah, my knowledge to where if I can picture what the future holds, and I could probably say too that yeah, what do I see coming in the near future? Is that well, really that one thing that I do see coming in the future though is that talking about the use of digital software, about email addresses, be having that ability to where that we can actually do a lot of that stuff. Yeah, remote work, but then also having a lot of the information that's more convenient to us. From whenever we do write about something, understanding about our language. When we think about that though, and I'll go and tell everybody here real quick that what I dream about a lot of times is that for how the program reads our minds. So if you're going to be thinking about something, though, that you what you basically are doing is to where if you want to go and write down any notes or anything else that you want to talk about, is that yeah, clear mind thinking. Anything that comes to your mind, and that's why a lot of times too is toward that maybe that would maybe improve the IQ score just a little bit more. Is to where instead of maybe writing it is toward it would be like a program toward it would study about what exactly that your mind is thinking about. And so if you're going to be a writer and speaking about something, making any sorts of statement about something, and let's say if you want to start out the topic by stating as to where that about a dream that you had, something that makes a lot more sense to you just because that you have a clear mind of what that you want to talk about, but then you're trying to get other people to understand what you're talking about. And so it's like, yeah, well, really, that you want to start the sentence by saying is toward that something like introducing this, or yeah, that an upcoming event or something like that, or something that's going to start out the title that's going to approach as anybody idea so far as is that yeah that you yeah come to a conclusion. Are you familiar with this? Or if you're familiar with that, well, here's all the resources that I came up with. It took me 10 minutes to figure this out. And so you want to start the sentence, the statement by saying something like that, is to where like you want to think about it as to where if you're, trying to get somebody to be familiar with something, but then if you come up with a new resource about something to where that this is going to be the next stage, the next level of technology, and having a good, clear, open minded about the things to be discovered, right? But still, I just really think too is to where that yeah, whenever whenever a manager who's going to be watching you work, and then they're going to maybe want to know too is toward I would actually like to watch you write, and actually, if you can show me how is it that you do that. And so most companies might say is toward yeah, I would actually like, for you to actually show me how do you do your work? How do you do that? And so it sure seems that way to where that you're able to get a lot of people's attention. You're able to get a lot of people's attention whenever you do. Yeah. How do you do that? How do you do that? But still. So you have right here, yeah, you have right here the Word document right here where you can change the size of the image right there. But still, whenever you show somebody how to do something, no, chances are that, yeah, people are going to probably ask you to show them. Show me how you do that. And now for sure that for certain is to where that people watch you work, and they're going to ask you to show me how you do that, and then for sure that they're going to say that, well, we want you, yeah, we want to buy more of your time. Well, I want you to train me. You'll show me how you do that. So I know a lot of companies out there are going to probably say that most of the time, no, that we would want to schedule an interview with you, but yeah, show me how you do that. Show me how you do it. Don't just talk about it, but still, that if you can show me how does this work, and then I'll be able to follow up with more about what you're talking about. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that yeah, if that's really the magic key, though, to the imaginable of tomorrow, is that whenever you show somebody how something works. And that's usually, the way it goes nowadays, is that, really, that unless for any reason at all, that, in case of anybody that may want to know too, that, well, yeah, well, I already know how it works, but really, at that mic, but still. But, yeah, that's something that I just really, you can, keep that in mind, everybody. Just keep it in mind. But I just really think too that that whenever if we were to write a cover letter though about anything in particular, that it sure seems that way. That if you want to start that cover letter by stating as to where that, yeah, this is what I found out. That this is based on the analysis work. Based on the research from what I found out though, that are the things that I found. Based on what the program is doing, and what's been going on, and then from what I have a clear mind open, and what I assume, what I can assume, and so yeah, whenever you assume something, I'll go ahead and write on here. Whenever you assume something, that pretty much means right there, everybody. That means that whenever you do assume something, that's another way of how your mind speaks, and to where that yeah, that's something that you think. That's something. That's another way of how you're trying to get your thinking toward. Okay, it's possible that that's the correct answer, or you're just going to guess. And most of the time, it's a guess. Everybody else will probably say too that that's usually what it is. Whenever you guess something that you're not 100% correct, that's the exact answer, that's exactly what happened. But let's just say that most of the time, any writers were going to probably say that, just assume that's exactly what happened. But still, so languages can be explained in different ways, in a variety of ways. And let's just say that if you were to set the language to where to transmit it into a different language, so a lot of times, a lot of story writers might even say too that's whenever the source of language in English writing, and as well as the transitional studies really comes in hand whenever if you're able to convert, if you're able to translate the English language to like maybe a Spanish language, or maybe a French type language, or anything like that. And that's why it sure seems that way, to where that yeah, that there's a difference between what somebody said and what okay, from what the feedback that you were getting from the other speakers and the writers and the proofreaders and the editors, whoever that that you were talking to. And more likely that they're going to say is as to where yeah, well, whenever you speak about something, that's not exactly certain, certainty, for uncertainty about whenever you assume something that you're just trying to guess about. Okay, if all the information was not gathered up yet, then okay, just let's just assume that's what was said. So it sure seems that way. That's something that only contains about maybe 250 words in a sentence, though. And a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, not everything is all 100% certain. But let's just say, though, that like everybody else will probably say too, that does that really kind of give you a clear idea about what's going on, and any more updates at some point. So a lot of times, with somebody will just want to assume what happened during a time rather than just be saying is like, well, I don't know. Well, guess what? There's a lot of companies that might even say too that I don't know is not really an answer. That's just another way of how to be stubborn about something, or whichever you want to call it. But still, that we all know that if there's something for what you call for not yet to be not accurable, or still unknown, or I don't know, or anything like that. So a lot of times people may want to know too that whenever people ask the question and you respond in statements such as like an I don't know, well, people might even want to know too as to where if you can just think positive, is to where instead of giving an I don't know answer, though, even if you are not 100% correct, if that's really a good idea, just to say, is to where to just kind of give it a good idea. Is that, yeah, well, you can take a guess too and just think as to where you're not 100% certain. So that you can also look at that as to an imaginable of tomorrow. That something that's not 100% certainty. But on the other hand, that it's just another way of just to kind of provide good feedback. And when that feedback is also going to, like you by say, is to word it, yeah, well, your honest opinion about something. And so that's why it sure seems that way to where that in order to be able to become a real good writer, though, it seems like to me that it's all about communication, ain't it? It's all about communication. So it's like somebody who discovers your letter, and then you talk to them, and then they talk back to you, or if they know exactly a clear idea what you're talking about, and anything else that comes to their mind also. So share the story, and anything else that you want to add and quote, and just to try and assume something, assume for the better. But anyway, so those are some good resources also. But anyway, but my goal is to be discovered for what I can find that someone else finds interesting, and also about how can we tell a story? Yeah, I can go ahead and highlight about tell a story about. So yeah, I that's something I want to talk about. Is that it hasn't happened yet, but that's something that we can think about, though. Is that why do you think that most writers would find that really relevant right there? Is that if they're going to go ahead and yeah, if you're going to go ahead and include a question mark in your word of speech, any authors if they're going to include like any apostrophe, or commas or question marks in their sentences. And at 102 is toward it yeah, whenever you're going to be reading, whenever you're going to be writing an article about something, it's like a lot of times it's like that sometimes it's like those writers are going to be asking the questions at the same time, such as, yeah, what exactly, what do you think about that? So I can also include that right here. What do you think? So I know a lot of authors would probably think that way. To where, what exactly? Yeah, what do you think? So whenever you're going to be reading any books or articles about anything in particular, that they're going to include a question mark about something, or anything that kind of comes to mind, such as, "Well, I wonder about that," or "I wonder about this." So a lot of times it's like, yeah, are you trying to get those readers to kind of speak and just to kind of assume, okay, what is that you're asking, or what do you think about, or anything? So yeah, so it just seems like it's all about communication, right? So a lot of times, everybody else might even say too that, yeah, well, it's a long story, but just to kind of make that long story short, though, that whenever I first started the title, that I was actually thinking about something that was coming to my mind before that I started talking to this other person, and then they started talking to me about a few of their ideas, and so that's how the whole connection started. So I try to assume that if you were to meet somebody, and you're likely thinking too that somebody's going to approach your idea very well, and they're going to say is toward that sounds very interesting. But then that very interesting, of course, is also going to indicate is toward that, yeah, that's how it kind of all comes together right there. Is knowing about for what work is still to be discovered, and also that makes a lot more sense now, just knowing that you explained it to me. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.